we won states, and all of a sudden, I said, what happened to the election? It's off. And we have all these announcers saying, what happened? And then they said, oh, because you know what happened? They knew they couldn't win, so they said, let's go to court. And did I predict this, Newt? Did I say this? I've been saying this from the day I heard they were going to send out tens of millions of ballots. I said exactly, because either they were going to win, or if they didn't win, they'll take us to court. So Florida was a tremendous victory, 377,000. Texas, as we said. Ohio, think of this. Ohio, a tremendous state, a big state. I love Ohio. We won by 8.1%, 461,000. Think of it. Almost 500,000 votes. North Carolina, big victory with North Carolina. And so we won there. We lead by 76,000 votes with almost nothing left. And all of a sudden, everything just stopped. This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election. So our goal now is to ensure the integrity for the good of this nation. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay? It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment, and we will win this, and as far as I'm concerned, we already have won it.
As far as I'm concerned, we have already won this election. Those are the words of the United States President Donald Trump. Let's bring in our political editor, no, apologies, our foreign editor here at the SABC News, Sophie Mokoena. Sophie, welcome to the agenda. We've been speaking about the importance of keeping calm, keeping cool heads, waiting for all the results to come in. The danger of the sitting president of the United States to prematurely announce himself as a winner when there's still more than hundreds of millions of votes still outstanding from the American people must be worrying to yourselves as foreign editors, because these are the stories that you report on saying they shouldn't happen.
Well, Tabi, so this was expected. You know, the media, sometimes we are being criticized when we break stories. You'd recall that the media in the United States of America did talk about reports, even though they didn't attribute the source, because clearly they got a tip-off within Donald Trump's camp that he told those around him that he is going to declare the elections if they don't go his way in terms of perhaps the Electoral College declaring him a winner. And therefore, he has done just that. And I remember many people on social media were criticizing the media, saying that the media is actually making this story up. But this is what has happened. And indeed, you look at his body language, he's angry, his tone, you can hear he's angry, you hear him breathing. You know, you can hear he is really, really angry. And clearly many people now are worried in the United States of America. And some are saying this is something that has never happened in that country. And therefore, you know, people tend to use the United States of America to benchmark themselves, those countries, some of them, in terms of democracy. But unfortunately, as we have predicted and as we have experienced in these past 4 years, this is President Donald Trump. It was expected. And I think what the media said this week, now it's happening. And therefore, he's going to the Supreme Court. because you'd recall that a few weeks ago there was a huge fight between the Democrats and the Republicans when they were supposed to fill a vacant post in the Supreme Court. Others arguing that they must wait for elections and the incoming president must do that. And he insisted, and he did finally nominate his candidate, and today the candidate is the judge at the Supreme Court. And now when you look at how the Supreme Court is constituted, majority you have the conservative judges, and therefore there's fear that whatever Donald Trump take to the Supreme Court in the form of a case, he is going to win, and therefore we'll see. Now, we knew that every state, there are legal representatives who are on standby, attorneys and advocates and senior counsel are on standby. We knew. And now, even here, Donald Trump saying that he's going to the Supreme Court, for some of us, we are not surprised. And I think the criticism that was leveled against media, I think now the media is vindicated.
Yeah. I was now speaking, Ms. Sophie, to our reporters earlier this morning, Ishan Garg out in India, as well as Bruce Harrison out in South Korea. In fact, while speaking to Bruce Harrison, those are the words that came out of Donald Trump's mouth when he said, "I've won this election." Ishan showed shock at how so far this has been panning out. Bruce was even more shocked when he heard it himself, because at the end of the day, it then becomes a question of whether Donald Trump is stoking that base. We saw the whole week that some people within certain cities, democratic states, if I can call it that, were boarding up their windows or their shops, fearing of something like this and fearing that there could be some sort of unrest in the streets of the United States once the president says, "I'm a winner," and then at the end of the week, the result comes back and says, "Actually, sir, no, you are not the winner."
When you look at President Trump's constituency, you have people who are very rebellious and who are in a fighting mood. And unfortunately, he has failed on many occasions to try and calm down his supporters. And therefore, clearly, he was sending a message to them to say, brace yourself for a war, not a war in a literal sense of a war, but to say we will have to fight and fight very hard. And therefore, you can expect disruptions because, you know, in every country, you have people who are so committed to leaders. You know, they become a cult, and therefore, whatever the leader is saying, they comply and they don't look at what's likely to happen thereafter. And unfortunately, this is Donald Trump. He has done it again. And I don't think many people who have followed Donald Trump or reporters or analysts are surprised. And I think even heads of states around the world and government, they were expecting this to happen. At some point in time, there was supposed to be a drama because even before voting during the campaign, he indicated that these elections will be rigged. You know, he was already preparing the ground, you know, to continue to make those wild allegations and sometimes the misinformation. And now it's a lot of work for journalists now. No one is going to sleep now because every journalist would want to have those papers to see what are the arguments and what's likely to happen. And therefore, it's a mess. It's a mess. It's a mess.
As a journalist yourself, you sit back now and you say, we report on African elections. We've reported them this week alone. America, as you said at the top of this conversation, is the yardstick, so to speak, of democracy world over. We sit back now and we say, look, as African states, why should they be judged by America and told that they must respect the ballot if an American president can go on and say, I've won the elections, even though counting is still continuing?
Yes, indeed, despots all over the world, not only in Africa, dictators. This is what they're going to do. And unfortunately, I think COVID-19 has kind of exposed weaknesses of leadership and politics the system of politics in general, that these people are human, and you can't guarantee that they will act responsibly, and they are human like all of us. And therefore, as we deal with them, as we respect them because they are there, we must also have room for disappointment. And we shouldn't really depend on them, and think that if we don't have politicians, this is the end of the world. We must find a way as ordinary citizens to continue to empower ourselves and also to develop our countries and to feed the nation, and also to help the poor, the vulnerable, and enjoy and also celebrate those leaders who are always looking at a situation of ensuring that batupili, putting people first. But we must know that others will definitely not do it, and it depends who is in office. That is why it is very critical to protect the office, not the individuals, because individuals come and go, and therefore whatever decisions we take as people at workplace or anywhere in terms of leadership, we must always know that at some point in time, someone will come into that office and it is going to be a mess. And therefore, we must protect the office. This reminds me of the ISP leader, Ndate Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who, when there was a heightened tension between former President Thabo Mbeki and President Jacob Zuma, and those who were supporting President Jacob Zuma were insulting the presidency. He stood up in parliament, he stood up in rallies saying it's not about the person who's in that office, but it is about that office, protect that office. Because one day you'll find someone in that office who will act very irresponsibly.
Merci, Ms. Sophie Mokoena, SABC News foreign editor. Thank you very much indeed for joining us with your views. And I'm sure it's not going to end anytime now. In fact, we continue with that conversation, Ms. Sophie. For more analysis on the U.S. elections, let us now bring associate editor and U.S. foreign policy expert at the Daily Mavericks, Brooks Spector. Good morning, Brooks. Jeez, what a morning it's been. The past half hour has seen us go from we're still counting votes, it's a tight race, to all of a sudden, okay, these elections are over. He's going to the Supreme Court. He just voted in one of his own in Comey Barrett. Donald Trump has declared himself the winner of these elections.
Well, good morning, and it has indeed been a busy and amazing kind of morning. Donald Trump, to be clear, doesn't have the authority to end an election. There is no law or constitutional provision that says he does. That's an effort to get inside the heads of people. Donald Trump does not have the authority to end the counting of votes. And historically, traditionally, and legally, legitimate votes dutifully cast are counted until they are finished being counted. And that's in accordance with state law. There is no national standard on this. Each state sets its own regulations and laws. And so as a result, some states have a wider leeway in terms of time than others. But the basic principle applies. A legally cast ballot gets counted and goes into the total of votes that are necessary for a state to be judged to have voted for, in this case, Donald Trump or Joe Biden. Now, the president can fulminate all he wants that it's not fair and that the networks are not being fair to him and the news media is cheating. But in point of fact, all they're doing is reporting the vote totals that they receive from the various organizations that tabulate and report on it. As a result, I have no idea what the grounds are for the president's campaign to go to the Supreme Court to ask them to rule on an election. They don't rule on an election. They don't rule on the legitimacy of an election. They rule on the basis of specific cases brought on the basis of specific constitutionally defined issues. And so there's going to be an awful lot of scruffing around trying to figure out what the constitutional issue is that says you should stop counting ballots.
Yeah.
And no matter how many ways you try to say that, it's not clear to me that that's a winning argument. Now, there may be some wormhole they go through to get there, but I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of very fancy dancing on the part of the lawyers to make that happen.
Yeah.
As it continues, however, let me just pull up the latest map on my computer here. I didn't close the picture, did I? No.
No, I still have you.
As it stands now, the states that have been declared give a total of 227 electoral votes out of the 538 that are possible to Joe Biden,
Yeah.
and 213 to Donald Trump, with 98 yet to be called. The key ones, the major ones that are yet to be called: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, those three that were won in 2016 by Trump against Hillary Clinton, and then the addition of North Carolina and Georgia, which seem relatively likely to be in Donald Trump's camp, and Arizona and Nevada, which seem relatively likely to be in Joe Biden's camp.
Yeah.
And then that would complete it. But we don't know yet, because in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, they've still only processed, it appears from my sources here, that in Pennsylvania it's 74, 75%, Michigan it's a little less, and Wisconsin it's a bit more. And if you look at the total electoral votes of those three states together, that would be more than sufficient to give Joe Biden the win, were he to win all of them,
Yeah.
or obviously the other way around.
Indeed, Brooks, because indeed, Brooks, if you look at Arizona on the very graphic that you have in front of you, there's 11 electoral votes left for grab there. Then you go up to Nevada, well, 6 electoral votes outstanding. But all Joe Biden literally needs, with the number he has now, 227, is Wisconsin, although it's a tight race. 3 points or 4 points to, separates the two. But if Joe Biden takes Wisconsin with 10, Arizona with 11, and maybe squeaks in, I would not even say Michigan, but maybe even squeaks in Pennsylvania, if those mail-in ballots come in, which we should expect throughout the rest of the week, there's still plenty to play for. And it's quite dangerous for statements such as saying, I've already won this election, there's no need to carry on counting.
That's my point, that he's really trying to get inside the heads of people. And the other consequence of that, of course, is that he's trying to create the storyline that he won and they took it away. Whoever they is not clear, but they took it away. Whether they is people like you and me and the media, whether they is the nefarious Democratic Party, whether it's the deep state. I'm not entirely sure who they is, but that seems to be his pitch. The problem is this puts in the public mind an enormous amount of uncertainty as to what happens next over the next number of days. And if the argument is made to the Supreme Court, and if the court agrees to hear an argument about arbitrarily stopping counting the votes or discounting votes that were ultimately received the morning after the election or whatever it might have been, then we're in for days of legal wrangling if it gets to the court. Now, in point of fact, the official certification of electoral votes doesn't happen until December 9th. The states send their certified materials to the House of Representatives, where, as a general principle, it has been accepted without qualms. The only other argument that is sort of glimmering on the far distant horizon is that if a state legislature and governor of different parties end up trying to send differing electoral college lists, one for Republicans, one for Democrats, and if that goes to the House of Representatives, then we are in for a significant kind of bun fight.
Yeah, Brooks,
there is precedent for that. That happened in 1876, but that's a few years ago.
Yeah, Brooks, here's a question. A lot of people would think, as just listening to your what you're saying, Donald Trump cannot really dictate, for example, to states to stop counting or not, or when to receive particular ballots, or whether they're valid or not.
Right.
Those are decided by the various states. And if Pennsylvania has decided that ballots that come in day or two after the election, as long as they were posted on or before election day, will be counted. For Donald Trump to come out and say, look, I'm going to stop that, what leg does he have to stand on? Or as you're saying, it's just mere grandstanding, and in a way he sees something coming that might just see his second term, well, blown out of the window, and he becomes the second US president not to finish 2 terms in office.
Well, it'd be more than two presidents that haven't done it. Most of them were in the 19th century and early 20th century. But the basic larger point is, just as you say, since he has no authority to do that, and since in the case of Pennsylvania in particular, the state Supreme Court and then upheld by the Supreme Court of the country, votes that had been duly cast were eligible to be counted, were postmarked by the 3rd and arrived a day or two later, they have to be counted. I really do not understand what legal legerdemain they're going to come up with. I'll give you an obvious example of the kind of thing that this would be. A soldier stationed abroad in the Philippines dutifully gets his mail-in ballot. He signs it, he casts his ballot, he takes it to the post office on the base, it's mailed, it's dutifully stamped, and for whatever reason, the postal system, between the military postal system and the regular US postal system, the ballot is delayed or two. Is Donald Trump really arguing that that soldier doesn't have the right to vote and have his vote counted? I'm just having a little trouble trying to make sense out of that.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to look yesterday as well. There was reports that the U.S. Postal Service has disregarded, the directive that they must make sweeps of all the ballots that were still hadn't reached. I mean, there were still ballots had not reached people who had asked for them, and some of them cannot even be traced. And this goes back to the president, way back before the elections, tinkering with the U.S. postal system, because he knew that a lot of people, due to COVID, would not be coming in to the polls to vote, but rather asked for early voting. And that is where all of this is, basically leading back to.
Yeah, the postal system has admitted to somewhere in the neighborhood of 300,000 votes, which were tracked coming in electronically, but the tracking system didn't show them leaving a postal service facility. In other words, they didn't get to the states that they should have gotten to, or if they did, they eluded the machinery. And the postal system decided to ignore a court order from a federal judge, not the Supreme Court, but one of the district court judges, that they needed to go through and check for every single one of these ballots and make sure that they get them delivered. And the postal system's argument was an extraordinary one. We're really busy with our normal inspection process, so don't clutter up our lives with things like this.
Mm. Well, Brooks, plenty to look forward to in the next couple of days. Thank you indeed for joining us and giving us your insight. It should be interesting what comes out of those elections. Let me put you in the spot here, Brooks. Did you vote, and how did your voting go?
It's a secret ballot.
Brooks, thank you very much indeed for joining us there. Brooks Spector, who is Associate Editor and U.S. Foreign Policy Expert at the Daily Maverick, speaking to us there via Zoom with regards to that.